Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something literally invisible, but absolutely massive. We are exploring the incredible microscopic forces that are secretly pulling the strings of our entire world. We're talking about the tiny organisms that shape our food, dictate our planet's climate history, and fundamentally control our very survival.
So let me hit you with a bit of a weird question right off the bat. What do a hot slice of pizza, a storm cloud rolling over a forest, and the infamous sinking of the Titanic all have in common? It sounds like a bizarre riddle, right? Well, the answer is that every single one of these things is completely controlled by a complex and totally invisible microbial world. The microscopic organisms around us aren't just passive passengers on Earth. They are the active engineers of our reality.
Part 1. Tasty, Controlled Spoilage. To really see how microbes rule our world, let's start in a place we're all pretty familiar with, the kitchen. Now, evolutionary history tells us that our ancestors rightfully developed a strong disgust for rotting food. But that's mainly because about 1% of microbes are incredibly dangerous pathogens. The other 99%? They're brilliant culinary masterminds. This just shows the delicate balance we manage every single day. If you leave raw meat on the counter, it's a warm, moist, protein-rich paradise for those harmful pathogens to flourish. But humans figured out a really clever trick. By micromanaging the environment, say by dumping a whole lot of salt on it, we completely changed the playing field. Friendly microbes, which happen to be highly salt-tolerant, can suddenly outcompete those salt-sensitive, disease-causing pathogens. Through this controlled spoilage, we magically transform what would be dangerous raw meat into delicious, perfectly safe salami. We literally get salami rather than salmonella.
And think about it. If we didn't let food spoil just a little bit in these very controlled ways, we wouldn't have any of our favorite culinary delights. That lift and airy texture of a fresh loaf of bread, that's just yeast gorging on sugary starch and burping out carbon dioxide. The rich, complex taste of chocolate, that requires bacteria and fungi taking turns munching on raw cacao to mellow out its bitter compounds. And that pungent, funky flavor of blue cheese is simply mold spores digesting big fat and protein molecules deep inside cheese caves. Every culinary culture on Earth absolutely relies on these invisible chefs.
Moving on to Section 2, Fungal Wars and Chemical Weapons.
Okay, let's step out of the kitchen and into the forest. We usually just think of soil as dirt, right? But right beneath our feet, a ruthless, microscopic civil war is raging. On one side, we've got the Death Eaters. These are traditional fungi that rely entirely on decomposing dead matter on the forest floor, and they quickly hoard vital nutrients like soil nitrogen. But on the other side, we have the sapsuckers. These fungi evolved a totally different strategy. They ally with trees, wrapping their tendrils around the roots to trade water for the tree's sugary sap. But because they don't get nitrogen from the trees, they are locked in a brutal turf war with the Death Eaters. The sapsuckers actually deploy sneaky straw-like tendrils to siphon away the hoarded nitrogen, and even use toxic chemical weapons to kill their rivals. So why does this matter to us? Well, humans are actually tipping the scales of this war. Our agricultural fertilizer runoff is supercharging the Death Eaters, while our air pollution harms the trees the sapsuckers rely on. This is a massive deal because forests dominated by sapsuckers are actually 20% better at pulling planet-warming carbon out of the atmosphere.
But wait, this underground battle doesn't just stay in the dirt. Shift your focus up to the sky for a second. A single mushroom can catapult a staggering 1 billion microscopic spores into the air in a single day. When these spores drift high up into the atmosphere, they act as the microscopic scaffolding that water actually needs to condense onto. They literally seed rain droplets and ice crystals, quite literally creating mushroom clouds.
So what does this mean for us? The crucial takeaway here is that these microscopic organisms are constantly fighting for survival, using incredibly sophisticated biochemical weapons against each other. And humans? We've completely co-opted this microbial warfare for our own survival. Fungi that developed a compound to destroy bacterial cell walls, we call that penicillin. Soil bacteria that developed a toxin to disrupt the nerve impulses of hungry worms, we use that as the antiparasitic drug of ivermectin. In fact, for every 10 medications used by humans today, 7 contain chemical compounds that originally came from the natural world, mostly from this exact underground microbial turf war. Nature basically runs its own pharmaceutical R&D lab and has been for billions of years.
Section 3. Earth's Tiny Architects.
Let's zoom way out now from the forest floor to a truly planetary scale, because single-celled organisms have repeatedly altered the Earth's atmosphere and permanently recorded its entire climate history. Take the wild multi-billion-year narrative arc of cyanobacteria.
3 billion years ago, they were thriving in a hot CO2-rich Earth. Then they did something totally revolutionary. They invented photosynthesis. But by releasing oxygen as a byproduct, they accidentally poisoned almost all life on the planet, including most of themselves. The survivors adapted by evolving aerobic respiration, eventually getting outcompeted by algae as the Earth cooled down. But here's the kicker. In the modern day, they are making a massive and pretty dangerous comeback. Because human agricultural runoff provides them with an endless buffet of delicious nutrients, and climate change is heating up our waters, these heat-loving microbes are returning as thick, sludgy, toxic blooms that are literally suffocating marine life.
Now, while cyanobacteria were busy changing the atmosphere, other microbes were busy acting as history teachers. Meet the forams. They're these tiny, brainless, single-celled sea creatures that build beautiful little calcium carbonate shells. The ocean basically has two types of oxygen, a lighter, regular kind and a heavier, more sluggish kind. During cold periods, the lighter oxygen evaporates more easily and gets trapped in ice sheets and glaciers. This leaves a higher concentration of the heavy oxygen behind in the ocean water. When forams build their shells, they permanently lock in whatever that ratio of heavy to light oxygen was at that exact moment in time. So when scientists dig up these microscopic shells from ancient ocean sediment today, they are essentially reading millions of years of global temperature data from nature's own permanent thermometers.
All right, Section 4, Mysteries of the Deep Ocean.
Speaking of the ocean, let's dive deep into the abyss. Down here, the microbial rules of survival just kind of defy everything we thought we understood, creating a massive biological mystery. See, traditional mathematical models of nature predict a strict winner-takes-all scenario. If species compete for the exact same resources in the exact same environment, one should always dominate and the other should just go extinct. But in the ocean, thousands of different plankton species peacefully coexist in the exact same surface layers. Why is that? Well, it might be that our crude sampling methods, like dragging large plankton nets through the water, are actually jungling up hundreds of distinct, millimeter-thick microenvironments into one big jar. Or it could be that biological systems with multiple species competing for multiple resources occasionally get caught in chaotic mathematical loops where no clear winner ever actually emerges. The crazy thing is, we still don't fully know.
To really picture how wild the deep ocean operates, just look at the fate of famous shipwrecks. If a wooden ship sinks in warm, shallow water, decomposers eat it immediately. But if an ancient Greek wooden ship sinks into deep, oxygen-deprived waters like the Black Sea, it survives perfectly intact for thousands of years. Why? Because the wood-chomping microbes literally can't breathe without oxygen. Now compare that to the mighty Titanic, made of tough industrial iron. You'd think the iron would last forever in the deep ocean, right? No way. Down in the depths, there are bizarre microbes that don't need oxygen at all. They literally run their metabolisms by eating iron. Because of these iron-chomping microbes, scientists estimate the entire wreck of the Titanic will be completely consumed and vanish by the year 2050.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, the Petri dish problem.
Okay, so we've seen microbes flavor our food, fight chemical wars, record our climate, and literally eat luxury ocean liners. But I need to pull the rug out from under you for a second and reveal a massive scientific blind spot. Almost everything we know about microbiology, our medicines, our understanding of disease, it all comes from just roughly 2% of bacteria. Just 2%. Why? Because laboratory science relies heavily on petri dishes filled with nutrient agar, which is basically a fancy nutritional jello. Easy-to-please bacteria like E. coli absolutely love this stuff, but an astonishing 98% of the microbial world flat-out refuses to grow in our standard laboratory jello.
You wouldn't just put a wild animal in a sterile glass box and expect it to thrive, right? Well, bacteria are the exact same way. Look at these bizarre, highly specific lifestyle requirements. Some microbes in marine sediment form vertical conga lines just so they can breathe oxygen at the top, eat sulfur at the bottom, and pass energy to each other using literal electricity. You just can't replicate that on a flat piece of jello. Other bacteria demand complex symbiotic friendships, only growing inside the light-producing organs of adorable glowing bobtail squids. Parasitic bacteria, like the ones that cause syphilis, demand a constant supply of fresh, living host cells, and others require the crushing pressure and intense heat of deep-sea thermal vents. They are just way too picky and way too complex to be studied in a simple lab setting. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly thrilling thought. We rely on microbes for our food, our planet's atmosphere, and 7 out of 10 of our life-saving medications. And every bit of that knowledge comes from just 2% of what's out there. So if 98% of the microbial universe is still waiting in the dark, completely unstudied, what incredible, invisible wonders
What new medicines and what world-changing secrets are we about to discover next? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to explore the hidden mechanics of our fascinating world.